Okay, so in this tutorial I'm going to kind of walk you guys through how to model the kind of basic parts of the house. And then we'll probably leave some of the more detailed stuff for later. But for now we're just going to try and start by bringing in all the dimensioned drawings. And I'm going to start with your scanned images. You can actually just drag the PDFs into Rhino. Actually, I'm sorry. Before you do that, you want to make sure you're in the right units. Type in units, and we're going to go into feet. Okay, and I also like to turn the grid off. You don't have to do that if you don't want. Okay, so drag your PDF in, and then select import file. It might take a second. Or more. Okay, there we go. So now we have the first scanned image in place, and basically it's just gonna Rhino's just gonna place it like a surface, which is great because it means we can move it around and scale it pretty easily. So for right now, what I want to do is just scale this drawing roughly. So I'm going to select the surface, type in scale. I'll zoom in on your scale here, and I'll press 1. Okay, and now when we measure that scale, we should get about 1 foot. Now the other thing that I'm going to do kind of as I go through and model the house is I'm actually going to try and just pay attention to my dimensions. And make sure that I'm getting them close to kind of whole and what I assume are correct dimensions rather than tracing it, kind of perfectly trying to trace the drawings. I want to make sure I have the right dimensions. So even though this will help us kind of figure out where things should be, we're also going to pay attention to the dimensions we use when we draw it. I'm going to start by just drawing a rectangle. Oh, I also want to place this drawing on a separate, or this surface with my scan on a separate layer right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just go down to layer 5, right click and go to change object layer, and then I can easily lock that layer or turn it on and off and draw on top of it. I'm also going to change my current layer to layer 1, which you can see the display color is already set to red, which will make it a lot easier to see what I'm doing. Then I will use the command rectangle. Okay, and I'm just going to roughly trace the outside dimensions of the house for right now. Then I'll select that rectangle and go scale 1D. So if I'm not mistaken, the outside dimension of the house is 27 by 35, isn't that right? So I'm going to scale my rectangle to that. And then at this point we could also actually just kind of scale our house to this rectangle. So I could also, I just moved it so that it's lined up on this corner right here. Then I would type in rotate. I can kind of line it up better like that. Oh, maybe it's not quite going to be square for me, but that's okay. Just kind of get it close like that, right? Okay. And again, I'm going to use, as much as possible, I'm going to use dimensions. Whole dimensions rather than kind of tracing line by line the plan. So the next thing I would do with my rectangle here is I would offset. So I'll just type in offset, and the distance I want to offset to is 1.5 or 18 inches. Offset it to 18 inches. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then I'm also going to go in here and I'm going to trace my section for right now, just so I can get the general heights of things. So again, I'm going to use the command rectangle, and now instead of trying to line up with my section too closely, I'm going to turn on, make sure that Smart Track is turned on, so it should appear bold like that. And what Smart Track allows us to do is we can temporarily snap to a point by hovering over it. Then we can drag that point up along the ortho, and we can make things align that aren't actually touching. Because I snapped to that point before I drew that point, I know that it's in line along that edge. And I would do the same over here, snap to that point, and draw it up to the roof. And if I offset, actually, you know what? Okay, so I'm also going to draw the walls. So I will type in rectangle. Again, I'll snap to the outside, snap to the other line, draw it all the way up. So I'm actually going to draw, well, I'll draw this one here. And draw it all the way up. Okay. And then I'm also going to draw a line for my floor height. So rather than redrawing this thing, first what I might do is I might explode this first rectangle I drew, the overall. Then I'll take the bottom line here, offset. It's probably like, what, 4 or 5 inches. The bottom slab, that looks pretty good. And then the floor to ceiling is, and I can also use the command offset, type in D, enter, or I can just hit distance, click in Rhino. Looks like it's about 9 feet, right? Type 9, press enter, and kind of use that to figure out what the dimension should be. Okay, so that looks pretty good for right now, for starters. Oh, and then one other thing we might do right now would be to draw the kind of interior envelope, or the inside walls that separate the breezeway from the interior, fully interior spaces. So once again, I would just draw a line. I could trace the inside of the wall, interior wall. Select that line and offset it. Again, I'll just hit distance to kind of trace. So it looks like it's about 11 feet. And I probably can just mirror this about the midpoint. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, great. So at this point, I could also start to kind of draw out what these interior walls are. Now, I'm actually not going to model this yet today, because this is more or less a steel frame, like glass wall that spans from ceiling to floor. But I am going to model these walls in here, so that we have so that we can extrude those as part of the plan. So this stuff we'll model in a different way, so I'm just going to leave that alone for right now. But this stuff over here I'm going to model. So I want to trace this set of lines. So I could draw a line roughly right here. I'm not sure if that's meant to be a precise dimension. I could try it. Let's see. Like about 9 feet as well. Oh, maybe 10 feet? 9.5? Okay, something. And I suppose what we should actually do is move our plan before we offset that line. Oh, I don't know, 9 1/4. Okay, that looks pretty good. Lock my plan again. Actually, I'll maybe move this guy up here. Okay. And then I'm assuming this wall will be offset by the same distance, so I'll draw a line from here to here. Offset. Okay. And I'm not quite sure what happens in there, but I'll get to that next. So I could take this wall and offset it. Actually, before I do anything, I want to actually make a I want going to make, first of all, I want to make this outside wall one continuous line. So I'm also going to draw a line. Let's see what, if we just measure in distance, what this gap should be roughly. So it's about 1 foot. And let's say it's about 3 feet or 2 3/4 feet deep. So I'm going to draw a line starting here, 2.75. Offset it, 1 foot. Okay, and I can actually read some of these other lines that I don't need. Okay. And then I'm going to start to trim these and join these together. So actually, before I do that, let me mirror this, because it should be symmetrical. I'll select all 3 lines, type in trim, and then trim away the excess. Okay. And then presumably we actually also have a line that goes like this. But that is also, I mean, I don't know, I don't really remember if these are floor to ceiling windows in here. Maybe we have an elevation of that. Okay, so it looks like it's not drawn in here. So let's just assume this is a wall right now that we're going to punch our windows out of later. So at this point I could basically determine what my wall thickness is right here. Again, that's also probably a number you guys already know, but I'm just going to kind of use the plan to estimate. So I'll go distance, measure the thickness of the wall. So let's say it's about 0.4 feet. And what's really nice here is that if I've joined these lines before, so make sure you join these 3 lines together. Offset them all at once. So we're going to offset them inward. And under cap, we can change the option to flat rather than none. We'll just click on it and choose flat instead. And you can see if we click on one side of the line, it's going to actually create a closed outline between the original line and the offset line. So we can kind of skip the adding of more lines. Then I would also offset this little guy and mirror it about the midpoint of that wall. Then I could select all these lines and type explode. Oops. Select last. Trim. So if we want these all to be joined into one, we'll draw the windows later. And then I would join them back together. Okay. And then I'll do the same for these interior walls. So I'll offset this wall. It looks like this probably lines up with that. Actually, this might be, so let me explode this, because it looks like that little cubby is actually just, I'll turn my cap option off. Looks like that little cubby is basically the depth of the thickness of the wall. Or something like that. Could offset this line. Okay. And then I'll just select all my lines and trim them. And join them. Oops. Press enter to end the trim command. And type in join to join them. What I'm actually going to do here is I will make an end line. So I'll draw a line over the 2 ends that connect to this wall. And join those all together. And then I'm actually going to select my original wall and this new wall and trim the overlaps and then join it. So I have one continuous thickened polyline. Now I could look again at the other side, the other bedroom. So it's pretty simple. I'll just offset it in that direction. And again, I want to trim the overlaps, join it, draw a line that closes it. And we're basically just going to model these interior walls separately. So I would also, I'm not sure where this wall should be, but I'll just guess. Okay. Select all those lines and join them. Okay, great. So our next step, the way that this house is actually built, of course, is that the exterior wall is like a solid, except for the windows and doors, solid concrete scoria construction, and then the interior walls are kind of like infill. So the glass wall here, and then these interior walls are basically kind of like stud frame or something like that span between the slab and the ceiling framing. So we can kind of model them as separate elements because they are built in a different way and they want to be treated in a different way. And I would also, while I'm here, I would also offset this line just so we have a point of reference later. But again, we're going to cover that in another tutorial. And what I would do next is actually start to work in 3D. So once I have a good representation of the plan traced out, and a pretty good representation of the section or elevation traced out. Actually, there's one last thing I want to do here. So I'm just going to kind of try and line this up a little bit. I want to trace the profile of the roof. That looks pretty good. Let's just say there's a line, something like that. And there's presumably a flat space in the middle. I would use the command line, both sides. I'm going to snap to the midpoint of the top, pull it down to right there. So I'm using Smart Track, and then I'm going to draw it out because I selected the option both sides. Draw it out in both directions, like so, from the center. I don't know what this distance should be. I'll just type in 0.5. Whoops, I don't know why that happened. So line, both sides, snap to the midpoint, draw it down, type in 0.5, and then I'm going to hold Shift and click out to the right. Okay, I'll turn my drawing off one more time. And then I just want to connect this line with my other line that I drew up here. I can mirror that. All right. So now they've all been joined together. And actually, you know what? We really don't need this line as part of our roof plane. So I just exploded it and deselected those lines and then joined it back together. Okay. I guess I could also clean this up a little bit. I could draw a line at the ends where the slab meets the wall. Just trim those and join it into one closed outline. All right. So now what I would do is I would move into 3D. So I like to work in 3D in a paraline view or one of your like orthographic views. So in perspective, when you zoom in and out, sometimes you'll find that it starts to kind of be difficult to see, zoom in closely, or things will start clipping, or like your center of your orbit will get messed up. You'll end up trying to orbit around something and you'll lose it. Basically, it's just easier to work in top view. So to go from top view to a 3D view, all you do is hold Control, Shift, and right click and drag, which allows you to orbit, and that'll allow you to orbit in any viewport actually. But do pay attention to where the XY plane is, because that's the plane that you'll be drawing on when you're kind of like not snapping to things. But anyway, so I think it's easier for me anyway to work in 3D in a paraline view. We can choose to use perspective as well if you want. And I'm going to actually go in here and grab my section, and I'm going to rotate it. So I'm going to use the command rotate 3D, snap to the top of the slab in 2 places. Hold shift and click somewhere out there, and then I'll just type in 90. Okay. Now I'm actually going to take the exterior wall, and I'm going to move it vertically so that it lines up with the bottom of my lowest point of my wall. I'm actually going to extrude the whole wall to the whole height or the deepest height, I should say, that the wall goes, and that'll make it easier for me to come in later and kind of trim it relative to where the topography is. So I could use select. Right now, I'm going to select both of these walls. Actually, you know what? Before I even do that, I'm going to select my interior surface. I'm going to go onto a new layer here. I'm going to rename this as 3D model. And I'm going to make a new sublayer for that 3D model, which is this little second icon here, new sublayer. And I'm going to call that my slab. I'll set that to current. And all I'm going to do with this outline selected is I'll go to surface, and I'm going to hit the one called surface from planar curves. Or you can also type in planar surf. And then as long as you select a closed planar outline, it will make a surface. If I change into shaded, you can see that's our slab basically. And I could also extrude surface, and I would just line it up, make sure the option solid is set to yes, line it up to the bottom of my slab. I could delete that one, and that would be a good representation of my slab. That's now on the layer slab. I also want to model this wall though. Now I would go in here and select the, oops, I don't know what I just did there. Select the interior outline and the exterior outline. That's basically the 2 curves we need to make our wall. I'm going to type in move, and I'm going to hit the option vertical, snap to where the wall is currently, and then snap to where the bottom of that wall is in 3D. And I would type extrude CRV, extrude curve. Again, I want to make sure solid is set to yes. And then I'm going to extrude those lines all the way up to the top of my roof. That is more or less like the solid closed wall outline that we're going to use to subtract our walls and windows and doors from. So at this point I could also make another new layer and call this my scoria wall. Maybe I'll set that to a different color so it's easier to tell what it is. Okay. Then I'll select that wall, right click on the new layer, and go change object layer. Okay, so now I have it set on a separate layer. I could also model, at this point, my drop ceiling. So again, I would use the outline of the interior of the house. I could copy it, so type in copy, hit vertical, and then I'm going to snap to the drop ceiling right there. And then we could also copy that again, hit vertical, snap to where it is, and then snap to the top right there, the top of the roof, of the sloped roof, just like that. And I could also then take, I guess maybe the best way to do this little surface, so we also need to get this height in order to draw the overall roof plane. I would go in here, choose planar, or plane surface. You can also do that by just typing in plane. I'm going to select the option center, snap to the midpoint of that little line. Okay, and then just draw a plane based on the endpoints of it. You could also explode this. we could measure the distance of that little line. It's a foot, 1 foot square. And then I could do extrude curve. First I have to set, so first of all it's extruding in the wrong direction. It's extruding up and down, which is not what I want. So I would hit direction, and just somewhere out in space, click somewhere, hold shift to snap to ortho, and click somewhere else, straight. Now it's extruding in the direction I want. I could also hit both sides, change that to yes. And then for distance, I could hit 0.5. Okay, so now I have a little 1 by 1 square, and I want to move it to basically the center of the roof plane of my house. I would select it, hit move, snap to the midpoint. Now what I need to do is actually constrain my movement to ortho. So I'm going to move along the ortho axis. I can also hold shift to do this. And then I'm going to just tap tab on the keyboard. And that will mean that wherever my mouse is now, it's constrained to move in that direction. Then I will go over to the midpoint of my wall and just click. Now it should be right in the center of our house. And then I could model these 4 roof planes that slope down towards the center. I could also select this drop ceiling. Again, just go planar, surface. I would select that line, make a new layer, call it drop ceiling. Make sure it's on that layer. That way I can easily turn it on and off when I want to look inside. And then I would model the ceiling, or I'm sorry, the actual roof, not the ceiling. I could delete that lower line, and then I'm using the surface from 3 or 4 corner points. I'm going to snap to 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see right there I actually screwed up. I missed that snap point. I could select the surface again, go over here and hit points on, or just type in points on. That turns on the control points of my surface. Then I could select one of those control points, type in move, snap to that point, and then snap it to the end of the inside of the ceiling. So once again, I could do 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, you will have to draw them kind of in a circle, because if you draw them like if you go left, right, oh weird, maybe they fixed that. They used to make a twisted surface. Guess it doesn't anymore. But once you've drawn the 2 directions, you can just mirror them. And then I could select all 5 of those surfaces and join them. Make a new layer and call it roof. I don't know what color that should be, something darker. Okay. So now we've modeled the overall exterior surfaces of the house, the roof, the ceiling, the slab, and the walls. So I could turn off the roof and the drop ceiling right now. Actually, you know what? I want to leave the drop ceiling on, and I'm going to change my view to wireframe, and I'm going to extrude these interior walls. They should all be like closed outlines. We might have to select these 2 because one of them's an interior outline now. So select them all at once and type in Extrude Curve. I'm going to uncheck both sides, and I want to make sure solid is still set to yes, and then I would just snap to the drop ceiling. So just like that, and if I change it to ghosted, you kind of see we have our interior walls starting to take shape. Okay, so now I would turn the drop ceiling off again. It's just easier that way. Okay, then we kind of want to work by making subtractions. So I'm just going to kind of show you generally how to model the right kind of stuff to like cut out the windows and cut out the doors. And then I will let you guys kind of go from there, and we can pick up wherever you leave off with this tutorial. So I'm going to turn my drawing back on. I'm going to switch back into top view. And then I guess we actually kind of want to make so the openings that form the walls here are actually basically as tall as the space and span from the inside of these two walls. So what we actually want to do here, although that may not be correct for the one at the back. So that's good. Actually, what we're going to do, we'll switch into top view, and I'm going to make a polyline. So I believe, and you guys again, you'll know the right dimension for the height of this thing. I'm just going to draw a line right now, and I'm going to start way over here, behind where the edge of that cutout is. So I'll start drawing over here. Snap somewhere that is along that line, hold shift, draw down to the slab. You may want to turn center off. Things do start to get complicated. You can see I snapped to a point that's in 3D. Don't worry about that, just stay in top view. And then I would hold shift and just draw it out past where that cutout would end on the other side. So once again, I just drew that line. If I go back into 3D, you can see I drew it in, I kind of drew it in 3D by accidentally snapping to three-dimensional points. Really easy to fix, just type in project to C-plane. Delete input objects, I'm going to hit yes. I want to get rid of the 3D line and just have it be flat. And project to C-plane will project it to the construction plane and just make it flat again. So now it's on the flat plane. Then I would use the command rotate 3D. Snap to one end of it, snap to the other end of it, and rotate it up 90 degrees. Okay, and then in here, I'm actually also going to make another outline. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to make a box. I'm going to use the command box. I'm going to snap to the lines that I've used to draw the interior volume. So the inside faces of the two interior walls. And then I'll draw it up to the top of that wall where the drop ceiling would be. Okay. Now, first of all, I could copy this box. I'm just going to click outside so I don't snap to anything and hold shift, stay on ortho. So I could actually use this box to create the opening on this side because that's just a square opening. And on this side, I'm also going to move it over so it's intersecting the wall. But before I use that box to trim the wall, I'm going to trim the box with this outline. All I need to do is extrude this curve. And I want to go clear through the box so I get a good surface to trim it with. And then I could actually delete the profile line just so I have less mess in my file. I'll turn off my drawing layer. Again, you want to make sure that that step is like aligned to your slab so it's not at the right height, or the wrong height, I mean. And then I'm just going to select that. Well, actually, you know what? The best way to do this is to select these two, the box and then the extruded curve, and type invert. Press enter, and then type hide. Now I can easily see I'm just working with these two objects. So I'll select my extruded curve and type trim the box. And then I'll select my box and type trim and trim the extruded curve. Press enter. Okay. So one last problem, because we extruded the curve on the ground plane and drew the box on the ground plane, you can see when we select the two, so that this box still has part of its bottom surface and the extruded curve still has part of its bottom surface. Those two surfaces are actually overlapping right there on the bottom. we just need to get rid of one of them. So I'll select this extruded curve, explode it, hold Control on the keyboard to deselect that bottom. Then I'll hold Shift to select the box and type in join. And you should, and this is important, get a closed poly surface. You don't want any openings because then we won't be able to use it to trim it. And then I'll just go in there and delete that excess bottom. Then I could type in show to unhide everything. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and trim the openings for my walls. I'll select the wall, type Boolean difference, and then select those two boxes I just made, and press enter. And there you go. There's the opening where the step is, and the opening on this side where the kind of porch is. Okay, so if you were to kind of keep working in that way, let's see here. Oh, okay. So you would use, again, you could bring these into your Rhino file, or if you knew the correct dimensions for the window heights, you could do kind of the same thing. So you would model a box bigger than the depth of your wall, make sure it's hitting the right points along the length of the wall, and then move it up to the correct height. And then do the kind of same process to subtract the openings for the windows. Okay, so let's leave it at that. So if you guys can kind of model all the cutouts for the windows, including, there's one in the kitchen, there'll be one by the fireplace, I believe there's one in each bedroom, and we can actually, if you guys are feeling ambitious, you can do also the doors here. So model a cutout for the door that goes into each bedroom, the bathroom, and then between the Zagwan and the bedrooms. And we'll have to get some more information to do these cutouts. But if you guys want to just make sure you model all the windows and then start on the doors as well if you get to it. And we will go from there. All right.